Elections Committee, joined here by my colleague, City Councilor Matt O'Malley, and I'm sure other colleagues will be coming in. Today, we are here today to discuss Docket 0106, petition for a special law regarding an act to further leverage commercial development to build housing, create jobs, and to preserve inclusionary development. This hearing is being streamlined on Boston City Council TV online, is being recorded and broadcast on Comcast Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Verizon 1964. Docket 0106 was sponsored by Mayor Martin Walsh and referred to the committee on January the 9th, 2019. This home rule petition seeks to, 1, provide the City of Boston with the ability to make adjustments to the linkage formula and threshold for application to new projects as needed, eliminating the restriction on making adjustments only once every 3 years. Also, this home rule petition seeks to codify the city's Boston inclusionary zoning development policy into a zoning code, allowing Boston to maintain its ability to secure IDP obligations from residential projects regardless of zoning approvals. It should be noted that this home rule petition is proposing amendments on Chapter 665 of the Acts of 1956, an act authorizing the City of Boston to limit buildings according to their use or construction to specified districts, a document that has been amended several times since its enactment, last being in 2001. We're also joined by my colleague, City Councilor Lydia Edwards. I know that we have our administration panel in front of us, Chief Sheila Dillon, Chief of Housing and Director of D&D, Tim Davis, who's the Housing Policy Manager at the BPDA. I know that Trin Wynn is here, Director of the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development, and Sonal Gandil, who's a Senior Policy Advisor at the BPDA. So good to see you, Sonal. And with that, unless my colleagues have any initial opening statements, we can kind of get right into it. Matt, any questions? Chair recognizes Councilor Lydia Edwards for a brief opening.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I want to first go on the record as saying I commend the mayor, and I do support his goals in updating linkage without a doubt. I think that this is a wonderful opportunity to talk about, though, how far we should be going when we get this power. And I say when because I'm hopeful that the city does get the power to be able to update linkage beyond the 3 years and beyond the certain percentage that's permitted. I don't think that this recommendation goes far enough, though. I do think that when we do update not only the linkage, that we should be looking at actual numbers to be put in, not just asking for powers to implement them one day. I also think the May should be an absolute in terms of putting the IDP in our zoning and assuring that when we do have as part of a zoning ordinance, that the process should be between the mayor and the city council, as in we have a role to play in helping to update the linkage and not just between the mayor's office and the BPDA. I think that there's so many strong elements about this home rule, but the language in Section 2, referring to IDP especially, needs the most work. The final legislation, when we get through this, should include not just, should authorize inclusionary development and inclusionary zoning, not just inclusionary development policy, which is what I think this language ultimately is providing for. I want to make sure that we are sitting there and have a process ready for the community to be able to be directly to vote on IDP increases, which is what we don't have and what you're also not asking for. The City Council needs to be a part of this. And so while I support the end goals of this legislation, or this proposed legislation, I don't think it goes far enough, nor does it include all of the community, or at least the community representatives, to make sure we have a voice. So I want to also note that we as a community, the Nexus report specifically commissioned by the mayor had some wonderful recommendations that looked at increasing linkage to between $18 and $24 depending on exemptions, and those conversations should happen regularly, but also with the City Council. So I think we're headed in the right direction. I just think there's a place and role for the City Council in terms of zoning, and I want to make sure that whatever we have passed out of here includes that role, that voice. And so I thank you so much, and I look forward to working with you to getting it done.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. I'm also in receipt of a letter from our colleague, City Councilor Ed Flynn, District 2. Dear Council Flaherty, please be advised I'm unable to attend today's meeting on hearing on Docket 0106. This is an important discussion to have with our city's unprecedented building boom and our urgent need to build housing that is affordable to all of our residents. I will review the tape of the hearing when it becomes available. Thank you for your leadership on this matter. Sincerely, Edward M. Flynn, Boston City Council, District 2. So with that, I know other colleagues will be joining, but I'll turn it right over. to Sonal. Very good. Welcome, and state your name and affiliation for the record, and you have the floor.
Of course. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Flaherty, Councillor Matt O'Malley, and Councillor Lydia Edwards. My name is Sonal Gandhi. I work at the Boston Planning and Development Agency as a Senior Policy Advisor. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. We're here today, as you mentioned, to talk about the Home Rule petition entitled An Act to Further Leverage Commercial Development to Build Housing, Create Jobs, and Preserve Inclusionary Development. With this petition, our goal is to enable us to leverage Boston's strong development market to increase the resources and supply of affordable housing and workforce development funding for Boston residents. As you mentioned, Councillor Flaherty, this Home Rule petition is seeking two major things: to amend our zoning enabling legislation so that we can include or codify our existing Inclusion Development Policy, IDP, into the zoning code, and two, to amend the zoning enabling legislation on linkage to enable us to be more responsive to economic trends and allow us to have more control over the way the program is applied in Boston, independent of state legislation. The IDP was first established by a mayoral executive order in 2000. This policy is not currently a part of zoning and is only triggered on privately owned land when a project requires zoning relief. As the IDP was created through an executive order, it is not part of the zoning code. For the long-term preservation of this program, we are seeking the state's permission to put the IDP into zoning. Other Massachusetts cities and towns have this power, including our neighbors of Cambridge and Somerville, and we are only seeking to be able to do the same. The linkage program was created as a way for commercial development to contribute to a city's need for affordable housing and workforce development. Boston's linkage program began in 1983 with an initial fee of $5 per square foot for housing, and in 1986, $1 per square foot was added for jobs training. While linkage is specified in Boston's current zoning, we are constrained in what we can do with the program. Per the current legislation, the authorizing statute regarding linkage authorizes Boston to do only one thing, and that is to increase linkage every 3 years to reflect the rise in inflation based on the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. Since the program's inception in 1983, the housing linkage rate has increased by only $4.03, and the jobs linkage rate has increased by a modest 78 cents. The last increase to the linkage rates was in July of 2018, last summer, when we increased the linkage rates to $9.03 per square foot for housing and $1.78 per square foot for jobs, for a total of $10.81 per square foot. Today, Boston is one of only 2 cities nationwide that has jobs linkage, and we're very proud of that fact. But we're also looking to be on par with other cities regarding how much we can do with linkage. Given the cyclical nature of building booms and market conditions, today, with your support and affirmative vote, Boston is seeking greater flexibility and the ability to make adjustments to the linkage formula as needed. I'll now turn it over to Sheila Dillon, Chief of Housing, to talk about the IDP and linkage in more detail.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you. For the record, my name is Sheila Dillon, and I'm Chief of Housing for the City of Boston and the Director of the Department of Neighborhood Development. Thank you, Chairman Flaherty, for holding this hearing, and for the other city councilors that are in attendance. My role today is just to once again remind us all, go on the record for how productive these programs have been. I'll do it very briefly because I think a lot of you know this, but it's always good to refresh. Since 1987, the Neighborhood Housing Trust has awarded over $197 million to 236 developments, creating or preserving just shy of 13,000 affordable units in our city. It's a well-run program, and it's a solid partnership between the City of Boston's Treasury Department, the BPDA, and the Department of Neighborhood Development. The BPDA works very closely with the developers to define and memorialize their obligation. The City of Boston's Treasury Department collects these funds, and the Neighborhood Housing Trust, staffed by the Department of Neighborhood Development, makes the funding awards to worthy projects. The majority of funding is awarded through very competitive, transparent requests for proposals. Occasionally, the BPDA negotiates a housing creation where a developer takes his obligation and provides it directly to a project. But once again, the Neighborhood Housing Trust and the BPDA needs to approve those transactions. So I'm just here to say that linkage is well run, and it's been very, very productive. Likewise, the inclusionary development policy is also, it's a relatively newer program, but it's also been very productive and one that we want to make sure continues to be so. Since its inception, the IDP program has resulted in the creation of over 4,000 new units of affordable housing. 2,500 were directly produced by market rate developers in the form of on-site or off-site. And last year, Tim Davis from the BPDA, and the BPDA released a report yesterday that showed last year 546 units of below-market housing were completed and available for low-income and moderate-income families and individuals. Another 800 units are in construction. And what's just amazing about this program is those almost 2,600 units are being created in many downtown neighborhoods where we don't have a lot of opportunity to create affordable housing at absolutely no cost to the city. It's also worth mentioning that we have collected funds through the IDP policy, and those monies have been put to good use. 1,400 additional affordable housing units reaching lower incomes have been produced. So these are two very, very good programs that, while we're very interested in enhancing and evaluating, they really have served the city of Boston very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Trim.
Good morning. My name is Trin Nguyen, and for the record, I am the Director of the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development. Thank you, Councilor Michael Flaherty, for chairing this hearing, and also thank you, Councilor O'Malley and Councilor Edwards, for collaborating as well. My name is Trin Nguyen, and I'm the Director of the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development, and I have the pleasure of serving Mayor Walsh since January of 2014. Many of you know OWD, known as Office of Workforce Development, was formerly known as the Office of Jobs and Community Service. Since Mayor Walsh took office, we have worked with stakeholders, community representatives, and residents to transform the agency into an education, career pathway, and job training agency for young adults and for adults in Boston. Annually, our agency gives out $14 million to about 100 job training agencies serving Boston's residents annually. We also develop policies and programs that promote equity and access so that all Bostonians can participate in the economic vitality of the city. Part of our agency's work includes fiscally and programmatically managing the two largest mass hire centers in Boston, serving 15,000 residents and 761 employers annually. The Neighborhoods Jobs Trust helps complement these funds and leverages partners and corporate donations and grants at the same time. Developed in 1983, as you have heard my colleagues spoke about, NJT has received approximately $37.8 million to fund education and workforce training for Boston residents. Currently, it is charged at 1.78 square footage, and that is paid into the linkage and through Neighborhoods Jobs Trust. The NJT investments into workforce development ecosystem throughout the city. Our community's partners leverage about $500 million of additional investments from federal, state grants, foundation grants, and corporate sponsorships. These investments create an essential talent pipeline for employers with growth industries in healthcare, IT, hospitality, management, and social services and education. In recent years, with the support of engaged employers and the tight labor market, we're seeing the wages and quality jobs for these placements increasing over the last 5 years under Mayor Walsh. For example, last year, the average wage on NJT job placements was $15.23 above the living wage, and 72% of these jobs have employer-sponsored benefits such as health care, retirement benefits, and home ownership assistance. With continued and increased NJT investments, this trend will grow. Specific examples of support from the Neighborhoods Jobs Trust to our communities and its partners include Mayor Walsh's tuition-free community colleges. Since its launch in 2016, TFCC has enrolled 300 students with an average persistence rate of 71%. meaning they're likely will be on time for graduation and completion, and this is above the national and state averages. And 93% of these students are students of color with the average GPA of just 2.8%, and all of them are low income from neighborhoods throughout Boston that are hardest to reach. We also fund great programs like Community Servings, which offers a 12-week cooking and life skills training program that enables participants to produce 2,000 meals a day for critically ill. So you can see the economic triple effect of the NJT. And they also have 100% graduation rates among their employees with 72% job placement rates. We also invest in great schools like the North Bennett Vocational Street School, particularly in the two trades known as locksmithing and carpentry. Our investment last year, for example, supported 10 Boston low-income residents who were unemployed and underemployed, and the school had a 100% graduation rate with 75% job placement rate, with an average of over $18 an hour. As you can see, the Neighborhoods Jobs Trust has a very great impact on our community and on our residents as well. Thank you for your time, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Trin. Anything additional, Tim, at this time? Very good. Thank you to the administration's panel. Obviously, this is an issue I'm extremely familiar with. I know Sheila, Chief Dillon was here at the time. My very first piece of legislation when joining the council in 2000 was to increase the linkage formula. Had not even been given a cost of living adjustment since its inception in 1983. So 17 years went by in this city under the previous administration by not adjusting it from the initial I guess, entree back in 1983. So fortunately, we were able to, the council working with the administration was able to get an adjustment. So we know how important and vital this is to the creation of affordable housing and for very precious workforce development funds. I just have a few questions out of the gate. The BRA, doing business as the BPDA, commissioned a Nexus study that was published back in 2016. What has been the reaction or response from both the real estate development community as well as the housing and job trust community in terms of what the results of that Nexus study brought forth?
So I think you're referring to the draft study that was released in 2016,
yes,
December 2016.
Yes, yep,
And it was done by Carl Seidman, who's a professor at MIT. So that study is being completed. It's currently being completed. It's been on our website since it was first produced in December 2016. But it's a draft study, and we're looking to complete that study. And we're asking stakeholders to really take a look at it and take a look at all the various inputs that Carl is looking at, and really complete that study at this point.
Very good. I think from the sort of the real estate and development community, I know what works for them is a degree of predictability. And having that predictability allows them, as they're putting their pro forma, as they're putting their team together, and also realizing that they have to adhere to certain IDP issues or linkage funds, et cetera. So I would love to see, and I know we have, there's another docket on the council, docket 0134, sponsored by my colleague here. So when you sort of do a sort of a compare and contrast, one thing that I would like to see in either or both is almost like a sliding scale, because that gives developers a degree of predictability. So right now we have anything over 100,000 square feet that opens the door for someone to be cute and come in at like 95,000 square feet. And I think some have been playing that game. Whereas if we had something that was, something that for 30,000 square feet, something for 40,000, something for 50, 60, 70, I think we capture a lot that kind of gets caught in the under 100,000 square feet. So I know that when in the proposal in docket 0106, I guess the question is, are you exempting the first 100,000 square feet and keeping the exemption open as what it seems to imply that in section 9. So if you can look at the document, section 9 states that the zoning commission shall determine by regulation the value of the affordable housing exaction and shall be measured on a basis per dollar per square foot devoted to the exaction uses in excess of the amount established from time to time by the zoning commission devoted to exaction uses. So for me, that implies that the 100,000 square foot threshold has been eliminated. It's now at the discretion of the zoning commission to decide, you know, who or what or where. So my concern is the hocus pocus part of this, in that I think that we need to have a defined degree of predictability for everybody, And I would love to really see like a sliding scale. If you're at 10,000 feet, it's X. If you're at 20, or you're between 10 and 20, so just leaving it to the discretion of sort of someone in this building to kind of, it goes back to kind of how it used to work here, which was, it was more about who you knew and who you hired and how you kind of worked and navigated and gamed the system. I'd really like to see something really tight and transparent in that section. That's just, you know, food for thought. And I take it to section 9. So we are going to eliminate the 100,000 square feet, and we're going to leave it to the whim of the zoning commission.
So we're looking at all options right now.
Yeah,
As you
I
know,
would- yeah.
currently the threshold is 100,000, and the exemption is 100,000. So we're looking at all options.
Okay, and through you guys,
we're
is
in the
there
process
an
of-
opposition from the administration to have a sliding scale? Starting at, pick a number, say it's 30,000 square feet, so 30,000 to 100,000, there's a sliding scale, and then anything over 100,000, it's, you know, it's X, Y, and Z.
I think we'd have to look at all the options, and we're just beginning the process of getting
And I
feedback.
think that way there, we're able to capture a lot, particularly for those that were sort of playing the game around the 100,000 square feet. But I don't want to have it, I don't want it to be hocus pocus, because that sends the wrong message to the development and the investment community. That's making a commitment to the city. So if developer A gets a certain treatment and developer B gets a completely different treatment, we're back where we were in the previous administration, where it's who you know and who you hire, and that's just, that, and the cake is baked,
Right.
basically. And I don't want to go back there.
Yeah.
So
I-
I know this administration doesn't want to go back there.
Yes.
It's, from day one, it's
Yeah.
been inclusive. It's been, you know, allowing more folks to come to the table, which has been very refreshing. And I speak from having a front row seat during both administrations. And I got to tell you that the way it's been working now it's a heck of a lot better than what it was. I just don't want to revert back there and have it be at the whim of, you know, who you are and where you came from and who's on your team and whose sign you held. Bad for business, bad for business.
Totally agree with you. I think both the IDP and the linkage program under the Walsh administration has been run really well. There's rules. Everyone knows what the rules are. There's predictability. It's not negotiated project by project. So we're in full agreement with you.
Okay. And then if you could, at some point, someone forward me the list that it states that there's going to be exempt projects as this thing, as this home rule is sort of making its way through the process. There are some projects, I guess, that have already been filed prior to this being filed. So I guess we're calling them grandfathered, if you will. So if I could get an entire list of the exempt projects that were sort of already in the pipeline prior to docket 0106, I think that's a matter of sort of basic fairness and full disclosure as to who got their projects in, who's already in the pipeline, and who's already been assessed. And then this was filed. You know, we're seeing something similar on the medicinal recreational shift, where folks that were in the pipeline on the medicinal side of the house and got the letter of non-opposition from the council. They're sort of in no man's land right now because there was a shift and change when recreational started. So I just don't want to see a very similar situation where we're down the road, someone's already in the Article 80 process. They've got a degree of predictability. They've put their pro forma together. They're working through the process. And then it's like, oops, wait a minute. You didn't hear about docket 0106? Oh, yeah, sorry. I just think that would set a bad tone. So, and then last, before I turn over to my colleagues, the linkage law indicates that adjustments be made on a 3-year basis, and that's based on CPI. However, the data, at least from the initial Nexus study here, points out the timing of the adjustments have not been consistent over the years, with the last adjustment was made after a 5-year period. So I guess the question is, why is that the case? Currently, as you know, it's $9.03 per square foot for housing, and it's $1.78 for job contribution, totaling $10.81, and that was 5 years ago. So if we're basing it on a 3-year sort of look back, how do we let the 5 years, those 2 extra years slip by?
So thank you for the question. So linkage has been increased 6 times since its inception. And what we're trying to do is depending on how the market is doing, as you know, the market was doing not great in 2007, 2012. And so we're trying to make sure that we're not impacting the development market in a negative way. And by not increasing linkage in the commercial end of the market, we were able to actually, not put a greater burden on development. The increases since 2000, there was an increase in 2002. There was a catch-up for the years that we missed between 86 and 2000, and then there was an increase in 06, 2013, and 2018. So we have been keeping up with the increases, the 3-year increases, especially since 2002.
Gotcha. It's gotten a lot better. And as I said, when I joined here in 2000 and hadn't received any adjustment for 17 years since its inception, since it was created in 1983. So it was created actually under the Flynn administration, and then it was allowed to sort of stay at 1983 numbers in 2000, which was a little over the top. But okay. Thanks. That's it for me now. My colleague, City Council Lydia Edwards.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. And I just walk me through, if this passes, the process then for assuming we now have the flexibility. So now we win, right? So the administration has this policy, you have the power to adjust, or tell me the powers that you would immediately have.
So what we're asking for is we're asking for the flexibility to increase linkage based on market conditions. We're looking at the threshold. As you mentioned, there's a 100,000 square foot threshold. We're looking at the timing of the payments. Currently, the NHT dollars have a 7-year kind of time frame, and the NJT has a 2-year time frame. We're looking at, should there be a floor for these rates? How are other cities doing, and what do other cities do? Should the adjustments be made annually versus every 3 years? So we're looking at all the options currently to see what makes sense for us. As Councilor Flaherty mentioned, we've heard the developers. Predictability is key. Transparency is key. And so we're looking at all the factors to see what actually makes sense. But we would like to make those decisions. We'd like to have the flexibility to make those decisions based on what we're seeing in Boston.
So, and those are all great. So if I understand, you want the flexibility for those decisions to be made in-house in Boston, right? As opposed to having to send up a home rule petition to try and always get these adjustments. So the ability to have that conversation about the thresholds that we're going to have, whether it's 100,000 square feet or not, the timing of the payments, if it's going to be 7 years or not, what the amount, right, per square footage, all of that, this would allow for the administration to have that power. So I guess I'm wanting to make sure then, I'm just going to give a hypothetical so you can walk me through this. So the administration says now we want linkage to be, it's what, $9, $12 per square foot, right? If this passes, the administration would then propose that to the zoning commission?
Correct.
And the zoning commission would vote on it?
Correct.
Up, down, all around, and be done with it. And so I guess my criticism of that process is I think the city council has a role to play in that conversation. I think the city council should be able to propose, to have, through ordinance, to be able to update and also have influence on those conversations. And I understand, your job isn't necessarily to increase the power of voice of the city council. That's ours. But when it comes to something that directly impacts our district so intimately, and that we're the ones also getting the phone calls, I'd like to see the process include the city council and allow for us to have an up or down vote on this process as well. So when I think of this goal, which I completely agree with, so everything that you want to have in control and everything that we should be assessing, there's no opposition for me on that. I can't support a process that excludes the city council in those, I think, very vital decisions and allows us to really push or move also further maybe than you want to go, or contract, if there's some of our members who think that it's actually going to hurt development. So that's this process as outlined in terms of goals, I agree with. I absolutely think that we need more money in the Jobs Trust. I absolutely think we need more money in the Neighborhood Housing Trust. But I can't see how we, as a city council, then can support a process that further excludes us from that conversation.
I would add, Counselor, too, that right now we have embarked, the BPDA in the lead, have embarked on a very thorough process looking at both policies with job advocates, affordable housing advocates, and the development community in a very transparent, very thoughtful way. And those meetings have been really good. They've been very, very productive. And I think they're going to also yield a lot of good input as we look at this policy.
Agreed. I'm concerned about the public debate and the discourse and the back and forth and the ability to have that when dealing with, let's say we want $24 a square foot, or other city councils being able to really push directly with direct vote their inclusionary development policy and their linkage. They can do that in other cities. So I think when we're at the table to talk about how we're changing process, my 2 cents is that the process needs to include us and allow for our leadership as well.
Any other questions? No other questions at this time. And on the metrics of that, using this opportunity, and so you look at the kind of the differential between the housing funds as well as the job creation funds, realizing we're in a global economy and lots of companies looking to come here, but yet sort of our residents, our citizens aren't being able to get plugged into a lot of those really good jobs. So on the job training stuff and even on the affordable housing stuff, I think as a city, we need to identify like who's doing a really good job at it, who's doing the job training, who's kicking butt on that front, who's also putting people into homes. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to take this opportunity to give it a thorough assessment. And if there are those organizations that aren't really cutting the mustard, that we need to have a very frank conversation with them. I think we should be wrapping ourselves around the organizations and the outfits that are doing it better than anybody, from the job training and job placement side. Mm-hmm. Placement's huge. You can go through a job training program, but if you're not plugged into a job at the end of the job training program, it's a colossal waste of everyone's time. So how are we tracking that data? Who's getting the sort of the gold star, and who do we want to continue to send people to, and who's kind of not cutting the mustard anymore, been around for a while, kind of mailing it in a little bit. They may not have sort of the plug-in power anymore. I think this is a real important opportunity for us to call people forward and to grade them. And to have metrics associated with that funding. And if, could be a great person and they could be around for a long time, but if they're ineffective and they're not plugging people into these opportunities, then it's time for them to kind of maybe think about doing something else. And let's embrace those that are doing it better than anybody. I think this is an important moment for us as a city as well. Same with housing. There are going to be some that do it better than others. And again, we're at a critical juncture here where it's so important to create more affordable housing and to get people into homes and get roofs over their head. And if there are those that are doing it better than others, then that's where we really need to be spending our time, effort, and resources. But I'll defer to you, Trin, on where is the metrics, and can that data be provided as well? Can the council get a look at, where are all the sort of the job training programs, and what's their success rate? Yep. And where are all the affordable housing organizations, and what's their success rate? And I really think it's time to step up.
Yep. So I think that's a really important question and comment. Since Mayor Walsh took office in 2014, what we did was we recreated a more transparent process. So one, we created an annual report that tracks what we fund, who we fund, and how we fund, with specific measurements in the kinds of job training that has evidence-based practices on growth industries that are tied to labor market data. So, for instance, you can't, it's not that we don't support it, but it would not be successful if you were to apply for a training program in the manufacturing industry, just because we don't have jobs in that in that space. And so we do fund more growth job industries in hotel hospitality, not necessarily low-wage jobs, but jobs that allow for upward mobility and wage progression at the same time, flexibility in hours, and also employer-sponsored benefits. We also fund, job training in healthcare, not necessarily in entry job in the healthcare sectors, but how do we get lower wage jobs up the ladder, and how do those training dollars help graduates and low-wage workers obtain these certifications so that they can obtain those jobs. You're absolutely right that we actually moved away from a rapid job placement model and more into looking at jobs, quality jobs. So we're looking at what is being offered to the graduates and in which industries, and then we track them over the placement and also 6 months at the same time. Now, I think your comment around shifting from legacy funding into newer programs or best practice ones is a good one, and we have been working towards that in the last 4.5 years, which is why you've seen the wages and the programs that we funded have been a little bit, more of in the space of upward mobility for career pathways rather than just low entry level jobs. But we have all that information on our website to make it transparent, and we have it annually as well.
Great. Yeah, and I would concur with that, and I'm happy to have a conversation with the mayor on that. Again, the legacy plus the ones that are now coming out of the gate. You think, I mean, I know we have some of my friends from the Hotel Workers Union here. They do it probably better than anybody. Their training program is phenomenal. And from day one, and they're making sure that they're tracking those folks right into a real-life opportunity as well as, a career.
Yep.
You get companies like Amazon and GE and Reebok and all these life science companies, insurance companies, they're all coming to Boston to tap into the intellectual capital. There's lots of jobs that are flowing with that. And this is, I guess, a message to sort of the legacy job creation folks. If they're not ahead of the curve on that front, we're going to miss out on a huge opportunity for our residents. If that economic opportunity is not trickling out into our neighborhoods, if you're a kid in the Mission Hill Housing Development or you're a kid in the D Street projects and you're looking just, up the street, then you can just see all the buildings coming right out of the ground, and you have no sense of connection or hope and opportunity to any of the jobs short of the mailroom. That's a problem. And so I think that from these very precious dollars, we need to be wise in terms of where we're spending them, what types of training programs, and more of the follow-up in terms of the placement, and making sure that that's how we're going to be able to kind of allow folks to rise up, and also to help them to get into wages where they're able to sustain themselves and their families and to pay the rents that we're seeing in our city. So I appreciate your attention to detail on that, and if we could have some type of metrics surrounding the job training and the job placement piece of this, and it's going to be, I think, a test, and it may be challenging for some folks to really bring their A game, but that's what we need in a global economy. Chair recognizes Councilor Lydia Edwards. We're also enjoyed by my colleague, City Councilor Frank Baker, as well.
So just to follow up on a little bit on some of the Nexus study, why not, I'm going to ask two questions and you can answer. My first is, why not adopt numbers since you're going for the additional power to allow for, why not adopt numbers that could be a baseline that allow then for certain kinds of increases automatically going forward, so that if you're going to go for it, you're going to go to the State House, why not ask for that instead of just the power to get those numbers, number one. And then number two, I'm specifically concerned about the predictability, I think, is something that we, especially in East Boston, are now concerned about. With now we have Suffolk Downs, and that's a 20-year project, 5 phases, and so there's a certain amount of predictability that development would want. So if this passes, would they be based off of the current linkage, and then that's for the next 20 years, they get to keep that kind of linkage rate, despite the fact that you may be increasing linkage as you go along? And which I hope we do. There's a certain level of predictability for something so massive that's why I would really like to see some increased baselines put in immediately, so that even if a large drawn-out phase project goes through, that we at least know we're getting more in terms of income per square footage. So essentially, one, why not put some numbers in here? And then two, based off the Nexus study, and then two, what are you going to deal with the 20-year phased-out long projects coming up? And assuming this passes.
So I'll take the second question first. As we mentioned, the linkage is in our current zoning, and the rate that you pay, the linkage rate that you pay is tied to the date that you apply for zoning relief. So if you look at the code, and it's dense, I understand, but the simplified version is the rate that you pay, the linkage rate is tied on the day that you apply for zoning relief because it's in the zoning code. Yep. So that's the first question, and the second question. And the first question is, we're looking at everything at this point. We're as Sheila mentioned, we're in the process of talking to developers, to jobs advocates, housing advocates. What are the interests of each? Predictability comes up. Very early input we had from developers is we would like predictability. We understand that, and so we're looking at options right now, and we're really just in the process of getting input right now.
But not in this draft. So I'm curious why in this you didn't put any numbers to start with. I understand and I appreciate, and I think it's vital that you are having constant conversations with advocates and folks. And then I'm critical of the then ultimate process that it's really between you guys and then the zoning commission. That's another comment. But my concern, or not even concern, I'm just wondering why you didn't start with a baseline increase, or just say we're starting here and there's going to be automatic increases starting here, and then go forward with your conversations and have the flexibility that you want on an annual basis or quarterly or whatever else you wanted to do. Why not just start with something?
I can try. The number in the Nexus study, while it had some small amount of analysis of what developments actually could sustain and still be viable, it was not thorough enough. And the BPDA, both with IDP and linkage, have hired consultants to independently look at how much we can extract from development before they don't want to be here or it's not financially viable. So that work is right now ongoing, but we wanted to start this legislative process. So it's really important that we get that number right and we don't just put a number in, because my concern is that both programs have been so productive because we've been very thoughtful about the number, and we don't want to rush putting a number in that may not be viable. So I really would rather, have the authority and then working with everyone, including the development community, find the number that's going to create the most amount of affordable housing, at the same time allow development to continue.
So I'm just summarizing, the responses, because it's still being studied, what you think is the appropriate balance that has predictability but also assures development, to allow for the program to be a success. And then with regards to the second component on I'm so sorry.
Suffolk Downs.
Thank you, Suffolk Downs. They're basically going to get the linkage payments that they signed up for when they seek zoning relief.
It's when they apply for zoning relief, correct? That's the code.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilor. Chair recognizes City Councilor Frank Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. Tran, how are you today?
Very good, thank you.
Good. We're meeting later, so I'll save a lot of my stuff for then, I guess. But
Thank you.
So do we not currently put any dollars towards manufacturing training?
It's not that we don't. It's that when we have an RFP out, we ask for labor market data that suggests that training has to be tied to a job at the end of the day. While the restriction for Neighborhoods Jobs Trust is to support and fund job training for low to moderate income Boston residents, we don't have a geographical restriction on where the job is. So for example, you can have a manufacturing IT job training program that is evidence-based, and the placement shows that you can place the graduates into good-paying jobs at the end of the day is what we fund. It doesn't, those jobs don't have to be in Boston, but in the regional area, so folks can get to.
Do we spend any dollars on the trades, plumbing, carpentry, electrical?
Yes, we actually do. We provide a significant amount of training into building pathways, Operation Exit, which works with the criminal justice system, is a training program that provides job readiness, technical blueprint training, basic math, English, and preparation into any of the 13 trades and the carpenters.
Yeah.
And that's in addition to the building.
How much do we give to those two?
So
And are they grants?
Yep. So we provide, for those two funding agencies, we provide anywhere between $300,000 to $600,000, but it all doesn't come from Neighborhoods Jobs Trust. One of the successful criteria for a NJT grant is that you can leverage our dollars with other federal corporate funds and other funds as well.
So these dollars, we're able to leverage those and get more from the feds or
Correct.
wherever else?
So, yes, so we would make a $50,000 grant to Building Pathways, and they would leverage another $200,000 or $300,000 from other grants. And we also have US DOL grants and state dollars in which we fund the trades training program as well.
So are the unions, the trade unions, the only place receiving dollars for that type of training?
Actually, Youth Build is another agency, and we worked with them on the first registered state apprenticeship program into green maintenance with Wynn Properties as an employer. We also funded and registered the first EMT, which is the Emergency Medical Technician apprenticeship, into the EMT departments as employers. So they're not the trades.
Where do they get that actual training for that EMT training?
We co-design it with the EMT instructors.
Oh, EMT, so where do they go? Where does the training happen? Where is EMT?
At
The hospital?
1010 Mass Ave.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
How much do we have in the neighborhood trust now, the jobs trust?
So it fluctuates depending on the payment schedule. There are two payment schedules. The first one is, so we look at DIP agreements to project how much the income of the Neighborhoods Jobs Trust is over 6 months to a year and a half. And so how the payment structure works is that the first payment is due when the building permit is pulled, and the second payment is due at the anniversary of the first payment. So it works differently than the Housing Trust Fund.
Okay, so at permit, when they receive their permit, and then a year after that?
Yes.
On the anniversary? And
So given that structure, sir, we have approximately anywhere between 1.2 million to 2.2 million a year. So we have an
fluctuating
RFP,
between those
correct.
two numbers, that we spend every year, we'll spend $1.5 million, say, a year on job training.
Yes, and that is in addition to state, federal, and other foundation funds that we have.
But our cut could be around $1.5 million.
Yes.
Are we doing anything, so the linkage, that's not just downtown, so the Globe is gonna be about 700,000 square feet. Will they pay into this fund?
Yes.
So if they have 600,000 square feet of commercial over 100,000, they're paying in $1.5 million?
Yes.
At permit, and then the year after permit?
Yes.
Okay,
Well, there's only one payment, and it's
Yeah.
split in two.
so
The first one is due
we can
when
expect
the-
600,000, am I okay, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, take it, sir.
600,000 and 600,000 from them?
Yes.
For job training?
Yes.
Nice. Okay, do we spend any money, do we have any brick and mortar training that we do? Do we have any training facilities as the city?
We do not. We collaborate with other employers so that we can hold job training at their employer site or mostly at a nonprofit agency. So for example, we have two proposals with linkage with Children's Hospital and the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, which have linkage payments into NJT. And what we're doing is working with them as employers to train their entry-level workers into medical technicians, clinical researchers, or nurses.
And that training all happens at the hospitals?
Yes. And the linkage payments that they usually pay through their capital improvements is then rerouted into that training program.
Okay. Thank you, Trin. Sheila, you talked about a viable number for, so we're at $10.01 now?
1081.
1081. Are you able to say what you think is a viable number?
No, not yet, Counselor. We will, but we really do need to understand, look at commercial developments with linkage and see if it's possible to extract more without, making them
Yeah.
infeasible.
Hurting the economy or hurting the, yeah, okay.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. And then maybe to Sonal, or maybe just because I saw John Greeley here in the audience, maybe better suited for him, but when a team comes into the city, when they want to do business with Boston, and they have a project that they want to get the process started with, I assume that they're asking for the lay of the land, and they kind of want to know in that very first meeting, kind of like what are their obligations? We want to get moving, but in order to do that, kind of where do we start? And I would assume that conversation is probably that very first conversation, where we're informing them of linkage, IDP, Article 80, this fee, that fee. I mean, because they got to put their paperwork together. So is that kind of how it works when someone walks in the door and they say, hey, we bought this parcel and would like to do this and would like to get started, kind of like, what are our obligations? Is that, and maybe that may not be the best question for you, there might be something better suited for John.
So you're speaking about the Article 80 process, Article 80 Development Review process. So as part of that Article 80 Development Review process, there is a pre-file meeting that developers come in before they submit their Article 80 filing. And at that point, there's a lot of conversations that happen. This is the parcel of land, we'd like to develop X, Y, Z. And the obligations, what kind of impact, would we have? Very early kind of input from staff across the city as to what their thoughts are on the parcel. But obligations, linkage is in the code. So that's non-negotiable. If you are a commercial development, a non-residential development, you will be paying linkage over 100,000 square feet. So that's an obligation. It's a requirement. Developers are required to sign and execute a DIP agreement before they get zoning relief from Zoning Commission. So it is a requirement. It's non-negotiable. It's an obligation. IDP is, we talked about that as being policy. It's an executive order for residential developments, that require zoning relief. Tim Davis is always in those meetings as well, and we want to make sure developers understand that there is an IDP obligation for projects that that require zoning relief. So yes, absolutely, we do talk to developers at pre-file meetings and throughout the process as to what their obligations are. Yeah.
But so it's fair to say less moving parts, the better, correct? So, go ahead, Tim.
Hi, and for the record, I'm Tim Davis. I'm the Housing Policy Manager at the BPDA. It's very important that we let developers know up front what we expect from them from the inclusionary development policy. So when there are those pre-file meetings, either I attend or I make sure I connect with the project manager on that project beforehand so that they know what the base obligation is. And then obviously, if the IDP is more complex in terms of how it's defined than the linkage. So obviously, if it's a larger project or something complex, I'm there at the table. And some developers do call me in advance when they're thinking about buying a piece of property and determining what might be their obligations. I wish they did that more, because then that's providing them that clarity up front. But because we are applying the policy as evenly as possible, across the board, and when there's an exception, we've got a process for that as well that's different from what the previous administration did. I think there's a lot more consistency now than there used to be.
Okay. So by removing, sort of asking for a conditional use permit, a variance as the qualifier for contribution IDP, so you don't think that creates any concerns? Again, this is from the development side of the house where you're saying degree of predictability, not, try to minimize the moving parts, if you
Right.
will. But in 01, 06, the ask is of the home rule petition, it would be removing, asking for a conditional use permit and a variance as the qualifier for the contribution IDP, so.
That'll make it even more consistent. I mean,
Okay.
we will be setting the policy, we'll be setting policies as we have before, whether it's done with a transparent process, and then we would have to pass it for the zoning commission. But in terms of applying those policies, it'll be very consistent and much more consistent. When there's no zoning variance in question, I think it will capture projects that we're not capturing now, which aren't many, but it'll also capture projects even as we change zoning. It'll make it better.
Okay.
That zoning process will be easier.
And I would agree, and my ask at that point is to consider a sliding scale. Kind of gives you maybe more to work with when you have some folks in front of you, and whatever the minimum threshold is, it's, whether it's 20 or 30,000 square feet, up to, pick the number, but right now, kind of the way it works, it's 100,000 square feet was the trigger, and you'd have some folks that maybe stayed under that.
Yeah,
Trying
so
to
the trigger
avoid-
now is at 10 units, so we would certainly be looking at projects, what we might be able to do with smaller projects. We certainly would be looking at that.
And then capturing anything between that sort of 10 units and that 100,000 square feet area. Good. Any questions, any further questions of the administration before I allow the next panel to set? So Chair recognizes Councilor Frank Baker.
To piggyback onto something that the council from East Boston said, with the 20-year, graduating 20-year phases, so that's however many phases, 5 phases over the, so in 12 years, say, is there an opportunity to maybe legislate now a bump in what happens in 10 years? Opinions? No opinions.
We
Well,
would certainly look at it.
Yeah.
In 02, we had a catch-up, legislation for catch-up.
Yeah.
Linkage rate. As Council Flaherty mentioned, there wasn't an increase in linkage in the early years. And so in 02, we had special legislation when the linkage was raised 30%, as opposed to the CPI increase. So it's something we could look at.
well,
but-
I think that's a valid point if we're talking about dollars today and dollars in 15 years, especially after a whole neighborhood has been built out around it, it becomes more valuable. Maybe something we should look at, but I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
I think we'll
Thank you.
wait for the chair. Sorry, and vice chair. I guess we'll move on to the next panel.
Thank you.
Are you guys
I think on the next panel, we have Pam Kocher, President of the Boston Municipal Research Bureau, and Tamara Small.
Thank you. Perfect.
They caught me playing Candy Crush.
I thought you were going to throw something. I thought you were going to throw something.
No. I mean, I just think we should take the opportunity to have it. I want us to be able to vote on zoning. And look into that.
Hey, Pam.
Good afternoon.
Welcome, Pam.
Thank you.
Is this the first official time you're appearing, testifying
Second
as the new?
after.
Oh, bummer. All right, I thought but this hearing would have been the first. So welcome to Pam, President of the Boston Municipal Research Bureau. Also, we're joined by Tamara Small, CEO of NAOP. So welcome, and you guys have the floor, whoever would like to go first. And tell us your thoughts on docket 0106.
Yes. So as you mentioned, my name is Pam Coker. I am the president of the Boston Municipal Research Bureau. I am also a city resident. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to docket number 0106. We understand this home rule petition before you allows the Zoning Commission to formalize the city's inclusionary development policy into the zoning code, and gives the Zoning Commission authority for more flexibility in the linkage program, in part to respond to market forces. If the legislature and governor approve this home rule petition, We are concerned about how that flexibility will be used. We will monitor closely the evaluation of potential changes to the program. IDP is one of the most impactful tools the city has to leverage the private residential market to increase the stock of income-restricted housing in Boston. And we heard Sheila Dillon speak to the results of that program earlier. Through linkage, commercial development generates additional revenue for jobs, job training, and related services, as well as affordable housing. And we heard the administration panel speak to the successes of that program as well. We agree that addressing Boston's housing affordability challenges and job training needs are critical for the city and its residents. Retaining these programs' positive impact and opportunities for residents requires thoughtful consideration of economic dynamics in the city of Boston. We emphasize that any potential changes merit thorough study and market analysis. This work should be data-driven, analyzing the viability and the impact of possible adjustments, considering the range of project sizes, income and development dynamics in different Boston neighborhoods, the predictability of exaction changes, and the current climate of increased cost of project funding, construction materials and labor, and other factors. As the city seeks to continue to rely on the development-funded IDP and linkage programs, we must be thoughtful about requirements and exactions for market rate development projects to ensure a functional balance that continues allowing for both viable development projects and, the subject of today's hearing, the resources those projects produce through IDP and linkage for affordable housing, jobs, and job training, all for city residents. We appreciate this opportunity for stakeholder engagement on these important issues for Boston, and we look forward to further engagement through any committee working sessions. We also appreciate the public engagement opportunities the BPDA is providing on these matters. And then just as an additional comment, regarding potentially including specific numbers in a home rule petition that would go to the state for approval, a better practice would be to not include specific numbers. The reason is that this home rule petition has to go to the state for approval in the first place because the state holds a significant number of authorities, withholds them from cities and towns, and requires cities and towns go back to the state for approval on certain key items, and this is one of them. So going back to the state with a home rule petition that includes specific numbers for programs like IDP and linkage would mean that the city is then locked into those numbers. And if there's a need or an interest in changing those, the city could not make those changes on its own. It would have to go back to the state once again for changes to those specific numbers. So it maintains by putting specific numbers in a home rule petition, it retains the state's authority and reduces the city's flexibility to make changes in programs that are really the city's responsibility and the city is committed to doing and providing for their residents. So just a little bit of caution there about how the state-local relationship works in terms of authorities granted or withheld from cities. So that's one reason why we would advocate for a home rule position designed as this one is, which focuses on giving flexibility to the city of Boston so that decision makers in the city, including the city council as well as the administration, have the opportunities to be the ones that decide when and how any changes should be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam, and welcome, Tamara.
Thank you. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Tamara Small. I'm CEO of NAIOP Massachusetts, the Commercial Real Estate Development Association. NAIOP represents the interests of more than 1,700 members who own, develop, manage, and finance more than 250 million square feet of office, research and development, industrial, mixed-use, multifamily, and retail space in the Commonwealth. NAIOP believes that access to affordable housing is a critical economic development issue. Local business leaders frequently struggle to attract the best talent when competing with other regions in the country that provide more affordable housing options. Boston's population is growing more quickly than previously expected, with 759,000 people expected to live in Boston by 2030. This past fall, NAP strongly supported the 15 members of the Metro Mayors Coalition, who announced a target to create 185,000 new units of housing across the region by that same year. While there's no silver bullet to tackling this issue, it's clear that more housing production is needed. Unfortunately, at the same time, the cost to build this housing has never been higher. As just one component of that equation, construction inflation is at 6.5% in the Boston market, higher than the rest of the nation. The proposal before the committee today codifies many aspects of the inclusionary development policy and linkage, but it also makes some significant changes. These critical programs, as we've heard today, have resulted in the production and preservation of thousands of units of housing for affordable and middle-income families, as well as hundreds of millions of dollars invested in housing production, job training, and education. As the committee reviews the proposed language, the importance of transparency and predictability for real estate developers cannot be overstated. The more uncertainty and risk that exist, the fewer projects will be built, and as a result, fewer affordable housing units and funds for job training. A thorough, data-driven review will be critical to ensure the continued success of this program. NAIOP looks forward to being at the table for any working sessions or discussions around this very complicated issue. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Very good. Thank you both. I guess I'm going to jump right on that 6.5, the construction inflation. So is that just, what is that from, and is there a way to rein that in a little bit?
You know, the cost of housing, as I said, has never been higher, and it's really a mix of costs right now. So we're seeing land costs, labor costs, materials, they're all going up. And so it's a combined issue right now that's making it very, very expensive to develop housing. One of our members frequently states that it costs about $500,000 right now to produce a unit of housing. And that means to make that deal work, you have to charge about $5 per square foot. So for a 1,000 square foot apartment, you're talking about a rent of $5,000 per month. And that's the way the basic math of developing a project right now is, given these high costs of construction.
And then have you heard from any of your members about whether that will impact the cost of doing business in Boston in terms of this legislation, the home rule petition that's before the council? If that passes, are there concerns as to what that will mean?
Well, certainly I think as we think about this issue, we do need to ensure that, the viability of these projects, as we've heard today, making sure that balance works. So if there gets to be a point where the percentages for IDP get beyond a certain point where no longer do the numbers work, then those units will not be produced. And that means the affordable housing units that are part of those more, larger projects. So it's really important to strike that balance, and we are very much looking forward to being part of the conversation to make sure, again, that it's a market-driven analysis of these changes.
And do your members have any suggestions as to ways to raise additional funds for the Neighborhood Housing Trust or the Neighborhood Jobs Trust? If it's not through sort of this mechanism here, do they have any other thoughts and ideas as to how we can create more affordable units and how we can create more job training opportunities for folks in the city?
Well, certainly as we heard today, linkage was increased in July, and we, of course, also had the adoption of the Community Preservation Act back about a year and a half ago, that also much of that money is going toward the production of housing, affordable housing. So between linkage, IDP, and CPA, we have some very significant tools that have produced thousands of units of housing. And so, we look forward to the continued success of those programs. They're working, and, making sure that they are as effective as they can be, while also ensuring the production of housing is critical.
And then any inside intel, are we expecting an economic downturn anytime soon in terms of what any signs, any evidence that obviously it's never been hotter and
Right.
probably never had this long of a stretch with it, but
Yeah,
are any of your members sensing from sort of the goods and services or the industrial piece of this that
We
this is
certainly
softening?
hope not. Obviously, it's been a very prolonged economic recovery. Mm-hmm. Anecdotally, we're starting to hear about a slowdown in the production of multifamily, just given the incredibly high costs right now to produce housing. So anything that layers on additional costs will further slow those numbers from being produced.
And then Pam, the legislation as it's currently written here, is that something that you think would pass muster up there? And is it language like up to, and how do you zone in on whether it's per square footage for job creation and/or for the housing trust? In terms of, you had mentioned you want to avoid specific numbers, so it passes up there and then you leave it at the discretion of the municipality, which in this instance would be Boston, to plug and play in terms of what the numbers should be. So we're going up to the state asking permission to do
So-
something, and then
Yes.
they're going to grant us permission, but it's going to be, I guess, a blanket permission, and then we're going to come back to City Hall and be able to plug the numbers in? How would that work from your perspective?
So it's saving the city from putting prescribed policy in at the state level, which really limits the city's flexibility going forward. You'd have to go back to the State House. So as filed, this home rule position looks for flexibility, particularly around the linkage program, as well as codifying the IDP into the zoning code. So I would recommend not putting any specific numbers into a home rule petition for this or any other purpose. What the city should really be asking for, and it is through the mayor's proposal, is the opportunity for the city, including this body, the council, and the administration, and the stakeholder groups in the city, to evaluate what are the appropriate changes, if any, to these programs, and have the flexibility to make the changes that the parties determine are the most productive for the success of these programs and for the ability to continue to provide affordable housing and job training in Boston. As much as possible, I would think a city or any other body would want the authority to make specific changes rest in itself, where things are happening on the ground level and where we engage directly with the stakeholders impacted by that.
Thank you, Pam. Any questions of my colleague, City Council Lydia Edwards?
Just a point of clarification. Thank you both for being here today and providing, I think, vital perspectives on the balance, because, well, I think you both represent, or you especially represent, the developers' interest in assuring that they can continue to grow and build. And as the funds that we have seen are so vital to our building of affordable housing, we do need to strike a balance to assure that building keeps happening. I just want a point of a clarification, because I understood that the way this language was written is it's providing flexibility, right, and power.
Yes.
So I don't understand why having a floor and also asking for power isn't an option. For example, we want the ability, as the City of Boston, to be able to control linkage and prices
Yes.
going no lower than $10 or where it is right now, and being able to say that in this zoning code, because I'm confused by saying the number. I get if we just say we just want $24 a square foot as a City of Boston, then yes, we would have to keep going back if we want to adjust that, bring it down, so on and so forth. But I don't understand why having a minimum isn't, with the power that we're asking for, why we would block ourselves or limit ourselves or require another home rule.
The only way you're limiting yourselves is if you pursue a home rule petition where you build in, lock in any numbers. So as much as you wouldn't want to put a ceiling, number for a ceiling on anything in that home rule petition, you wouldn't want to put a floor. I think the goal here is to give the city as much flexibility to make any and all of those decisions as it needs to.
Right, and I agree with that goal. I'm just wondering why we can't have both. Are you saying by virtue of asking for this power right now that we're asking with this language, that by having that ask and also saying we want it to start at this number or to build in automatic increases, that we can't have both or can't petition both?
So those program changes you just described, or potential program changes, can be made at the city level. There's no need to bake them into legislation that would then require city requesting again the state to allow certain changes. So anytime you want to change a number, if it's in a home rule petition, you have to go back to the state. So I would think it would be most strategic of the city to retain as much flexibility for itself to navigate making a successful program.
Yeah, no, and I still don't think my question's being answered. I'm asking procedurally by the law or by home rule petition requirements, right? If the City of Boston says we want the flexibility, that's what we're asking for our zoning commission, to be able to increase linkage beyond $10 or whatever it is right now. That's the home rule petition.
You can ask for anything you want in a home rule petition.
Right.
I'm just recommending very strongly that the city seek to reserve flexibility for itself.
No, I'm just making sure because I understood your prior testimony saying that by having a number in there, we would prevent flexibility. And I'm thinking
Yes.
that we could actually have both. We could be asking for flexibility with a floor, so that allows for us, not to, for example, have an administration that would go below the $10, which I would oppose. But making sure that we bake in both. And what I'm hearing from you is that you would recommend us doing and having that separate conversation about how high or how low we
Yes.
want to do after we have the power. After we have the power to do that, which we don't have right now.
Yes.
Right. And my question was just that if we could ask for both. And so, thank you very much.
If you ask for both, I do believe you're still putting some limitations on the city to be able to make the right decisions for itself
Thank you.
without interference from the state. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you both for your testimony. Appreciate your time and attention. Look
Thank
forward to
you,
working with
Chairman.
you. I'm going to call upon Jamie McNeil, Jerry Tejada, and Gustavo Rosario to come down, panel 3, to be very brief. Okay, here it goes there. Good afternoon, Jamie. Jerry and Gustavo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity today. My name is Jamie McNeil. I'm the general agent for the Hotel Employees Union, Local 26. We represent about 10,000 hotel and food workers here in the city of Boston. I'm going to be incredibly brief. I just want to make 2 quick points, a number of which we heard in the Promise Act hearings at the State House earlier this week, last week, excuse me. If you read the Boston Globe, if you're driving in from 90, you see the Four Seasons Tower, you see the Millennium Building, you see these shining towers, and you assume, Boston's booming. And the fact of the matter is, and we heard it at that hearing, Boston's still a working class city, and Boston's a city of workers. Not everyone's a developer. And what doesn't get shown is the people who clean those buildings and the people who make this city work. And so I just wanted to Local 26 is in favor of the proposal before you, but I just wanted you to hear from 2 people whose lives this program has impacted. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Flaherty. I just want to say that my name is Jerry Tejada, and I was very fortunate to be selected in a very, very competitive program called Best Hospitality, where at best, if it's not the best, it's nothing. And I'm actually a product of Best Hospitality down in Dudley Square. I went through an 8-week program that was completely free to me because I qualified because of the funding that's out there. And really, like they said today, was from job training from 9 to 4, Monday through Friday for 8 weeks. 2 of those weeks, basically, you worked at a 5-star property for free, doing actual job and basically showcasing what you learned at Best Hospitality. I was fortunate to go through the program for 8 weeks. It was a very grueling application process, interview process. They were very thorough, drug testing, background checks. I mean, it was very much like you would expect from working or applying to an elite organization. After I completed my 8 weeks in the program, in my 7th week, I was fortunate enough to get to be matched up with the Ritz-Carlton Hotel at the end of my 8 weeks with Best Hospitality, completing perfect attendance and really shining at the Ritz-Carlton. I was hired full-time, where I've been at the Ritz-Carlton in Boston for the last 10 months. And I've benefited from being part of Local 26 Union that's provided me with an upward mobility income that's allowed me to live and work in the city of Boston. I have affordable health care, so I have security there. It's low cost and affordable. I also have the benefit of paid holidays and job security through the collective bargaining that Local 26 fought very hard for in the labor strike that just recently happened in October for 46 days. So it's a tremendous program, and I think that the city of Boston is doing itself a tremendous favor by investing heavily in the future and the prosperity of the city by continuing to fund a program that I am right in front of you. I mean, literally last year in April, I had a career change, and 8 weeks later, I'm working at the Ritz-Carlton Boston. It doesn't get any better than that, does it? So I think that you're doing definitely the right thing, and I think that there should be a strong emphasis in recognizing that this is not a cost to the city of Boston or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This is an investment in the future and the livelihood of working class people to thrive in the city, and it's a reflection of what makes Boston great and what makes Boston strong.
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate
Thank you very much, Mr. Flaherty.
Congratulations.
And Gustavo Rosario,
Gustavo.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. My name is Gustavo Rosario. I am a member of Local 26, a Dorchester resident and a cook at the Element Boston Seaport Hotel. When my hotel was first proposed, the hotel developer, along with the city of Boston, my union, and Best Hospitality joined together to ensure that the job recruitment and training efforts for the hotel would ensure diverse workforce, not just for South Boston, but for Dorchester, Roxbury, and Mattapan as well. Today, the Aloft and Element hotels are success stories thanks to the diversity and the public-private labor partnership that was created. This story would not be possible without the job linkage program. We need more employers to step up to ensure we are creating good jobs here in Boston. I respectfully request to vote in our favor of this proposal. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, and we've also been rejoined by my colleague, City Councilor Kim Janey.
One last thing I'll say, often the perfect is the enemy of the good. I just want to make sure that whatever moves forward through this body is something that can pass in the State House, right? So,
Yep, very good.
thank you so much, Councilor.
Thank you, Jamie. That'll conclude the third panel. The fourth panel, Amy Nishman, Priscilla Williams, Joe Kreisberg, and Cortina Van. You could make your way down here, and then anyone obviously wishing to offer public testimony may do so. You just have to sign in the sign-in sheet. I know we currently have close to 4 pages of testimony. Joe, welcome. How you doing? We have Amy, Priscilla, and Cortina. So unless you guys have a preference as to who goes first.
Gentlemen first, I guess.
Welcome,
Good
Joe.
afternoon, Councilor Flaherty. Thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts. I'm here today on behalf of the Massachusetts Association of Community Development Corporations. We have 20 CDCs in the city of Boston who own and manage over 8,000 apartments, all of which are rent-controlled and affordable to low-income and moderate-income people. I'm also a resident of West Roxbury, and we are strongly in favor of the petition before you. We think it's long past time for the city of Boston to be able to shape its own housing policies, both on linkage and on inclusionary development. The city has ambitious housing goals that are laid out in Mayor Walsh's plan. We support those goals, but to achieve them, we're going to need the resources. In particular, the goal of creating 16,000 net new affordable homes in the city. We have 54,000 now. It took us 400 years to get here. To do 16,000 in the next 12 years is a big lift, and it would be a fantastic achievement, but we need the resources. And these are 2 programs that have been proven effective at getting those resources and delivering them to the community. So we strongly support them. And we think having that flexibility going forward to allow future adjustments also makes a great deal of sense, and we stand ready to work with you and the mayor to get this passed through the State House. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Chairman Flaherty and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on this important home rule petition sponsored by the mayor, the administration. My name is Cortina Van, and I'm a resident of Dorchester, and I'm here on behalf of the Mass Affordable Housing Alliance, MAHA, to express our strong support. Now, our mission is to educate and mobilize individuals in the community to break down barriers and increase affordable, sustainable home ownership opportunities for people. And so through education and also civic engagement, We're committed to reducing the racial homeownership gap that exists in Boston. Right now, the racial divide is a stark 44% of white households in Boston own their homes, and that figure is 29% for Black households, 26% for Asian households, and just 16% for Latinos. That means our households of color are not able to stabilize their housing and build assets the same way of many white neighborhoods are doing. It means we are being disproportionately impacted by ever-increasing rents, building sales, where the new owners want the buildings delivered vacant, and other housing crises that result in homelessness and displacement. While the situation in Boston is especially dire for our Black, Latino, and Asian neighbors, we know that the home prices in the city are well beyond the reach of very large fractions of working class families, as well as young professionals that are employed needing to recruit and retain. This is a social and racial justice issue. It's also an economic issue for the entire greater Boston region that's attracting jobs. So I kind of want to try to be as brief as possible, but part of this dynamic of the affordable housing is the city has done great work as far as with having long-time deed-restricted affordable housing for low and moderate income households, and we support that, and we know that there has that, with the linkage, it's not the only form of resources, it's one of the various tools, and so with the federal government withdrawal from housing and also with the state, we want to increase that, and so MAHA wants to continue to work with the city and other partners to advocate for additional state funding and federal funding, particularly for homeownership programs. And we're working to increase state funding through the Community Preservation Trust Fund and measures that would significantly expand the Housing Trust Fund. We strongly support the home petition and would put the Boston inclusionary development policy into the zoning code so that it would provide to apply as a right development as the city continues to rezone for greater density. It's important that IDP requirements apply to all housing developments where the number of proposed units is above a threshold laid out in the policy. We also we petitioned that Boston gets the authority to make its own adjustments to the linkage policy and necessary to make the necessary impacts of new commercial development and demand for affordable housing and job training. We also support in detail that the Nexus study that was done with the linkage that was commissioned by the BDPA and submitted by a consultant in December 2016, and that study supports substantial increase, and we definitely want to work with the city to, along with other community groups and the counselors to help facilitate that process of working groups, so we would like to continue to be part of it along with other community partners. MAHA will continue to press for responsible increases in the linkage and with IDP. Billions of dollars of development is happening throughout Boston. Developers are making millions, but our home buyers cannot find a modest home they can afford. We agree with the mayor and the council that we should not be losing our people in the midst of this tremendous building boom. MAHA is proud to have worked with many city councilors, nonprofit organizations, and administration to pass CPA in 2016. This was an important victory that means $20 million every year for affordable housing, parks, and historic preservation. We are working now to increase the state match, as I stated earlier, with CPA for the CPA funds. We do think, but we have to think bigger in our efforts to stem displacement and preserve a place for all people of all races and incomes in Boston. We applaud Mayor Walsh for advancing this proposal. We commend Councilor Edwards for her leadership on this issue, and we thank all 10 city councilors who have added their names. As we continue to engage with developers, we need to incorporate greater affordable housing requirements into land values in the city of Boston. We're seeing tremendous profits being made by long-time large property owners who are opposed to cash in as areas are rezoned, and by new investors who are speculating on land in Dorchester. We need to capture some of the value of being created by anticipated rezoning for dense residential and high-value commercial development to benefit all residents who are being harmed by this overheated market. It is important that we move as quickly as possible to reset the equation that developers encounter as they contemplate new projects. We at MAHA welcome the opportunity to engage with the council, the mayor, Boston State House delegation, community organizations, and stakeholders to build a broad-based campaign to pass this petition. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Cortina.
Thank
Amy,
you.
good to see you. How you doing?
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Thanks to my housing colleagues as well for testifying today. My name is Amy Nishman, and I've lived in Boston for over 20 years, currently in Rosendale, and I'm a senior vice president at JVS, where I have overseen our job training programs for the last 11 years. And I'm here today representing the Job Training Alliance, a group of 25 nonprofit job training providers who work to increase the skills and abilities for low-income residents and move them into career ladder jobs. Job training is the best and most cost-effective intervention to move low-income residents into and up in the labor market and move them onto the path to self-sufficiency. And we, the nonprofit job training providers, are really good at it. We know our students, the employers, and the labor market, and we work hard to make the perfect match, creating a win for job seekers, employers, and the city. Some people mistakenly believe that the federal government provides adequate resources for job training. In truth, currently, the City of Boston has enough funds to support 125 individuals to go through job training. There are 16,000 unemployed residents in the City of Boston right now, many of whom are from low-income communities of color. And then, on the state side, there's also no dedicated stream of funding that supports job training. Mayor Walsh launched an ambitious agenda to get 20,000 Bostonians into better-paying jobs by 2022, and we support this agenda. Yet, unfortunately, there was no funding tied to it. The Linkage program has provided key funding pipeline to job training and affordable housing, and this is more critical than ever as Boston continues to be in the midst of a huge development boom and the gentrification that goes along with that. These programs enable Boston residents to remain living and working in our city. After its creation in 1987, even though linkage could be increased every 3 years, it was 13 years before the first increase ever happened. As you, Councilor Flaherty, pointed out, increases have remained both insufficient and inconsistent. Simply adjusted for inflation, the job training fee would be at $2.27 today. This doesn't even take into account the increased need as well as the large development boom in the City of Boston since that time. We believe that linkage is directly tied to the mayor and the City Council's shared goal of continuing to want to ensure residents can live and work and be part of Boston, not just one specific demographic. Obviously, the two most important components of that are housing and building job skills so that people can move successfully up the economic ladder, hence the two prongs of the linkage program. We are grateful for the leadership of Mayor Walsh, his whole team, including the interdepartmental team that has been meeting with us, and the City Council, especially Councilor Edwards, for prioritizing the linkage program. We've been working, at least for 4 years, around efforts to increase linkage, in particular to capture the losses due to the failure of the fees to keep up with inflation. We especially support the mayor's proposal to bring the authority of increased linkage back to the City of Boston. The Job Training Alliance would like to go on record as continuing support and increase to linkage fees in the City of Boston for both housing and for job training. We appreciate the work of the city's consultant, Carl Steidman, and the Nexus study that the city put together, and the continued efforts to determine what the right level is for linkage, such that it adequately supports the housing and job training needs of the city without slowing development. While Boston is undergoing a period of unprecedented growth and prosperity, we continue to see growing income inequality and individuals who remain unemployed or underemployed, especially in urban settings like Boston. And we hear too often about the skills gap, that there's a mismatch between what employers need and what the residents of Boston are able to deliver. This can be filled by job training. Linkage was established in order to ensure that Boston remained a city for the people and that all residents of the city were able to partake in the successes and the growth of the city. We believe that we must take action immediately to ensure that the linkage program continues to uphold this mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And
Good afternoon. My name is Priscilla Williams, and it is a privilege to be with you today to offer testimony about how access to job training skills at YMCA Training, Inc. has not only contributed to my success in the professional world, but increased my self-esteem and provided much of the focus which led me to furthering my education and my family stability. I want to encourage you, our elected officials, to prioritize job training programs that have a positive impact on the economic vitality of Boston residents and neighborhoods. A little about my background. I was born to parents who both battled substance abuse and its many related problems. I was one of 10 children and spent my early years in the foster care system. When I was 5 years old, a miracle happened. My eldest brother and I were adopted by two wonderful people, really guardian angels, who changed the trajectory of our lives. They gave us stability and love, among many other intangible and immeasurable gifts. These gifts set my foundation and helped me to become the resilient, resourceful person I am today, still overcoming societal, cultural, and socioeconomic challenges, but continuing to sharpen my skills and strengthen my resolve. In high school, I belonged to many clubs and organizations. After I graduated, I went on to school at Clark Atlanta University, but in my freshman year, I gave birth to my daughter and was forced to leave school to navigate as a single parent and provider. Somehow I did this temporarily without specialized skills or a college degree and trudged on. By 2011, I was challenged with my own housing crisis, or actually overcame a housing crisis, and was in need of another miracle, and it came in the form of YMCA Training, Inc. I came to feel a strong acceptance here too. Each day, the encouragement I received increased my confidence and raised my hope and taught me the skills I needed to succeed in the workplace, and most important, repositioned me on the pathway to economic stability and to take care of my daughter. When I completed the YMCA Training Inc. program, the link from training to employment was immediate, and I went to work in human services. YMCA Training Inc. continued to offer me guidance and support in my decisions and efforts to re-enroll at Suffolk University. In 2016, I graduated with a BA in sociology, and in 2018, I completed 2 master's degrees, one in public administration and one in political science international relations. Now I'm thriving in my new position as a resident capacity program coordinator working for the city of Boston at the Boston Housing Authority. Economic security for Boston residents to increase resources for training and obtain jobs paying competitive wages with chances for advancement are the minimum tools required to stay afloat. And Boston residents continue to need opportunities to build their pathways to success. Yes, our unemployment rate is at an all-time low, and large-scale development means more jobs, but without quality job training and access to resources that can help mitigate the impacts of neighborhood displacement, residents will not be able to access these jobs. In closing, there are many things I would like to highlight about the long-term effectiveness of the YMCA Training Inc. program. How about the fact that my daughter is now a freshman at UMass Boston? But most importantly, may be the following points. Even though we've achieved a level of success, it is still our obligation and responsibility to advocate for the right to stability for others. In order to respond to the shifting needs of the workforce, there is a need for a collaborative approach, which involves the sharing of responsibility and resources from both the public and private sectors. As an adoptive guardian of job training initiatives, I am honored to be with you today to advocate for employment opportunities for others by encouraging you to support the Neighborhood Jobs Trust linkage in support of Boston residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do, and also thank you for sharing your story. We've also been rejoined by my colleague, City Councilor Anissa Rasabi-George. I guess just in broad terms to the panel, thoughts on my sort of sliding scale idea that it's not provided for in 0106, but also not provided on the council one either. But I just felt that from a degree to predictability, but also to capture sort of that, 0 to 100,000 square feet, or the 10 units to 100,000 square feet, having a sliding scale. So maybe more for the housing folks, what your thoughts are on that.
I guess there's 2 thoughts on that. I think that one of the things is having the line of communication open in this process. I guess I want to take a step back and say thank you to you, Chairman, and the other councilors. We're as a community, as a person in the community, a neighbor, but also being part of a community group with other neighbors, having had conversations about that. We think that's important to be considered. We know that this issue about it being data-driven and trying to find that balance and continue to have lines of communication open, as also this administration, the intergovernmental pieces like BDPA and D&D, where we they have structured and opening the door to be transparent about this process, that we continue to do that so we can have a productive conversation on how do we include folks that are under the $100,000 square footage, and that should be on the table. And I think we also are looking forward to the report that's being done by the consultant to help to look at those different scenarios of going to maybe the 30, 40, and 50, and considering that those scenarios should be played out so we can see how viable that would be and how that would help in regards to more affordable housing, and also the other deeper concern of having deeper affordability to reach as many working class incomes is important. So I think I think we definitely would like that to be looked at and have supporting data to help be able to implement that. And thank you to the administration and folks being open in the process. And I hope that the administration and the various departments continue to have an open process and working with various community groups and neighbors to be at the table to further these conversations so that we are able to obtain something substantive that's going to work for all the neighbors here in the community in Boston. Right. So we're definitely open to that.
Great.
If I could, just on that, just to distinguish the linkage from the inclusionary development program. So on linkage, it's 100,000, and as I understand it, if you build a building that's 101,000 square feet, you're only paying the fee on 1,000 square feet. So it's a pretty modest fee. So there's not as huge an incentive to go to 99. You know, it's a few bucks. It's not that much. So I think in effect there is a sliding scale. It sort of operates like a standard deduction on your taxes. We do think that does need to be lowered at least to 50, maybe a little lower. I think we want to avoid a number that's so low that, you know, small commercial buildings in Hyde Park or Mattapan or that can't afford it don't get hit. And I think, you know, 50,000 is probably the right number because it captures the bigger downtown buildings but not the neighborhood retail. I think the BPDA should have the data to sort of understand where the exact threshold should be. But I think the sliding, I think it operates sort of automatic. There's some level of sliding. Now, if you wanted to make it more progressive, you know, like the income tax, I suppose you could do that, and that there might be some merit in that $1 million or million square foot building arguably could pay at a higher rate. On inclusionary development, the threshold is 10, which means they have to do 1 unit. Right. I have heard that there's a decent number of 9-unit buildings getting built, so arguably it should be lowered to 8, but it can't go much below 8 probably. And I think there is sort of a either in or out of the program for a private developer to administer 1 affordable unit with income restrictions. There's a certain administrative hassle that I imagine they want to avoid. But there, I think the administration's current approach of having different zones seems to be working. I guess we'll see as the process plays out. And one thing I forgot to say earlier, I just think it's really important. The Nexus study was done in 2016. It's 2019. We've had a lot of time for study. We share the frustration that was articulated by others that we haven't kept up with inflation. And, you know, we can't study this to death. We need to move quicker.
I think the other piece to that on the IDP, as far as that threshold in regards to the 10 units, is also and this is something being, I think, discussed, is the issue of portfolios, where you have 9 here, 8 here, and there should be some responsibility and accountability for entities that are capitalizing on that and not, say, paying their fair share where they could be, and that definitely needs to be looked at.
Right. And for the job training folks, I always commend the fact that you guys are always sort of partnered with the housing folks despite competing for linkage funds.
We like each other. Yeah,
and I happen to think that the job training piece should the gap should be widening between the housing trust funds and the job creation funds. But unfortunately, that seems to be the case. But the fact that you guys kind of come together is commendable. On the job training piece, as you heard in the earlier testimony, my concerns around the need for metrics and folks to be able to tell their story and to share those success stories as those programs that seem to be doing a better job. There are, like everything else, there are some that are just doing better jobs than others. So I didn't know whether or not you had any thoughts on what those metrics
Sure.
should be
Actually,
going
the
forward.
city is actually one of the more funders that we deal with that demands accountability.
Okay.
The way that they administer the Neighborhood Jobs Trust is they give us a specific amount, about half of our grant up front, and then the rest of it you earn by placing your clients.
Great.
So literally, you are monetarily incentivized to do a good job, which many would argue there isn't a better incentive. Reputation is one thing, and I appreciated you saying I want to highlight all the Gold Star programs, and several of them have been up here today, and that's great. But if you want to incentivize quality across the board, monetizing it by only paying us when we make an outcome is one way to do it.
Okay. That's fair. Any other thoughts on that, Priscilla?
I just think there's a great intersection between job training and jobs, and we need to be hiring people and keeping pace with the market and leaving pathways to upward mobility so that people can ebb and flow with economic changes. And that's it.
Thank you. Any questions of my colleague, Councilor Kim Janey, at this time?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just briefly, I want to acknowledge and highlight and show gratitude and appreciation for all of the advocates in the room, whether on the housing side or the job training side. Very important work, as you've already noted, growing income inequality here in our city, huge wealth gap. And the more that we tap into and leverage the development in our city to benefit the residents of our city, the better off we'll be as a city. I think this is a very important conversation. Appreciate the administration's work on this. Certainly my colleague, Councilor Edwards, for her leadership on this issue. Certainly believe we need to increase linkage fees and make sure that we're doing all that we can to maximize the revenue that we need for affordable housing in our city and for job training. And then here to really hear from you as the experts to share your thoughts and your thinking about this as we move forward as a body. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Chairing has no comments at this point from my colleague, City Councilor Anissa Savi-George. So that will conclude this panel. I appreciate your time and attention. We're going to now move to public testimony. You're welcome to stick around and hear what folks have to say. So I appreciate everything. Thank you. Eric Heath. Eric, if you are still here, you were first to sign the sheet. And then I see Karen Chen is here, and I know that Melissa from Council Flynn's office has been providing some translation services. So I have, looks like Mei Quinn Huang, Bing Yang Ma, Gao Zin Wu, Karen and Lydia. So I don't know if Karen, if you can coordinate the individuals that have signed up to testify. Eric, you have the floor. You were first to sign up. Welcome, and thank you for your time and patience.
Senior Vice President for Human Resources at East Boston Savings Bank. Been in that role for 21 years, about 30 years with the bank as a whole. We employ about 550 people, about 300 of whom are in the retail division of the bank. That is the branch network that the great majority of which those branches are in Boston neighborhoods. I'd like to illustrate briefly the straight line that I see between linkage and the actual employment of Bostonians. We've been working for several years with the Asian American Civic Association as well as JVS with their banking and finance training program. The program teaches trade basics as well as job readiness skills and interview preparation. We've hired 12 graduates of the AACA program, and while that sounds like a small number compared to many of the numbers you've heard today, that's a very important number for those 12 people, and it's a very important number for me as an employer looking for skilled and especially entry-level employees. That makes the AACA program, we have hired more than half of the people we've interviewed from that program, and that makes it one of the best sourcing programs from a percentage viewpoint. The training these folks receive through AACA raise their skills, they raise their employability, and as candidates, they also come to us with AACA's good name behind them. We've been very impressed with their work to the extent that our talent acquisition officer, our recruiter, gives back in kind to the organization through speaking at the programs and participating in mock interviews. So in closing, anything that you can do to keep the flow of funds agile and responsive to the local economy and the local job market will result in Bostonians finding jobs in the neighborhoods. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric.
我係住喺航園街，愛定波街21號二地。我居住嗰度5年，原來嘅嚟到房嘅時間一停200蚊，而家到個房屋咧已經超過一停500蚊至一停600蚊，係以房以向啊！如果唔係現代近嘅房屋係60至80以上，我嚟排咧，基本上係冇個權利去排。要咧已經排我5年至10年都排唔到個嗌房屋。我嘅工人階級嘅就業係非常矮，人權也非常矮。我講繼續改下去呢，我個矮小嘅人權根本係消失。我希望政府部門會佢矮小業嘅房屋非常之緊緻，因為2年都上浮我300蚊嘅房屋如果你唔起矮小業嚟，你有陣時起嚟咧60%至80%嘅以上嘅嚟要排，因為我本身計嚟佢就排，你係冇佢權利排，你係唔符合，所以我咧矮小業嘅工人嘅臉係非常矮要更善嘅壓力。謝謝。
My name is Beng Chang Ma. I live at 21 Edinburgh Street. I've been there for about 5 years. When I first moved in, for one bedroom, my monthly rent was $1,300. Now it's over $1,500 a month. And I know that there's some affordable housing that are available. I actually went and applied for the 60% and 80% area median income housing, but my application was rejected, and I've been on Boston Housing Authority waiting list for many, many years, still waiting. And, for many low-income families, there's a need for affordable housing and deeply affordable housing, and we need to make sure that these families have access to housing, because it's becoming harder to continue to live in Boston. And so I support this policy, and we need more affordable housing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll go.
Then,
So hi, good afternoon. My name is Karen Chen. I'm here on behalf of the Chinese Progressive Association. We're a community-based organization in Chinatown. I was just here last week, on another housing policy, and I think that we cannot emphasize the importance of affordable housing, the need for affordable housing resources. And I want to thank the mayor for this proposal, and I think it's an important one. We know that IDP and Linkage have created affordable housing and fund for affordable housing and fund for job training, which is very critical to Boston's residents. But we're also for setting higher standards for developers and investors. We don't think that will, slow down development. I think that, we want to make sure that, the wealthiest population in the city, or the people who benefit the most in the city, paying their fair share. So we support the increase of linkage, because we think that developer investors should contribute more in closing the wealth gap. And we think that the neighborhood job trust should continue to create opportunity for low-income workers to achieve economic mobility, and so that their income can catch up with cost of living. We are for more IDP units and more affordable. I think, as Mr. Ma testified, there are IDP units are produced through the IDP program, but still they're still unaffordable to a lot of Chinatown residents, because the Chinatown residents' average income is $20,000 to $25,000 a year. So we are for targeting funds for housing that's below 50% area median income, and also the neighborhood housing trust fund should target housing that's really keeping residents in the neighborhood. The standard should be based on the neighborhood's income, so I hope that the city council will move this forward, and also have the state authorize this, as is very important to the community to have more affordable housing. So thank you.
thank you very much, Karen. Welcome.
Hello， 大家好，廣東話得我叫黃美群，我係一個三個孩子的媽媽。大聲啲。哦，OK。我叫黃美群，我係一個3個細路嘅媽媽。我哋係被逼遷嘅。
Hi, my name is Meikwon Huang. I'm a mother of 3 children, and our family was previously evicted.
因為我哋被逼遷啦，所以我哋要去揾房租啦。但係我哋去租房嗰陣時咧，因為有3個細路，好多房東都唔會租俾我哋，係非常之困難嘅。
Because we were evicted, we had to look for housing, but because I have 3 children, a lot of landlords are unwilling to rent to us as a family, and so looking for housing has been a very big struggle.
我都有申請嗰啲政府房屋。
I've applied for affordable housing.
因為我有1個女同埋2個仔。所以要申請嗰啲最少要3房或者4房嘅。
Because I have 1 daughter and 2 sons, and I'm also married, I need affordable units that have at least 3 bedrooms, if not 4 bedrooms.
但係嗰啲房屋咧係非常非常之少嘅，我已經申請咗10幾年都未輪到我哋。
But the opportunity to apply for 3 or 4 bedroom affordable units is very, very scarce, and I've been waiting for 10 plus years for housing.
而家我雖然揾到肯租俾我哋嘅房屋，但係個房租係非常之貴嘅。
I've had the rare opportunity to meet landlords who are willing to rent to a family with 3 small young children, but the rent is unaffordable, so it's not possible for me to live there.
就係因為房屋貴，所以我哋都好想自己買嗰間屋，因為我哋每個月都俾咗好多錢落去，所以我哋好想去買嗰間屋，買間屬於自己嘅屋啦。
Because rent is so expensive, I've looked at the possibility of purchasing my own affordable unit, but that's not possible either.
但係我想買啫喎，但係我哋買呢個收入咧，完全唔符合我哋可以買嘅一間屋。
So the affordable units for purchase, so affordable condos, my income doesn't qualify for us to even entertain the idea of actually purchasing a unit.
所以我好希望可以改變呢個政策，可以多一啲好似我咁樣嘅低收入人士，同埋有家庭即係有細路嗰啲，可以申請到房屋。
So I really hope that this policy reform and change would obligate folks to really prioritize not just low-income folks, but low-income families who need more than just one, right, or a studio or 1-bedroom kind of apartment, but who can really speak to the needs of working-class families as well.
所以希望可以多啲嗰啲3房或者4房嘅適合有家庭有細路嗰啲人可以住到嘅屋。多謝。
So just to reiterate, so affordable units that have 3 or 4 bedrooms, so that really, again, working class families have the opportunity to really be able to have stable housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good
afternoon, everyone. My name is Wu Gaoxing.
我住在Chinatown已经7年了。
I live in Chinatown, and I've been living there for 7 years.
我在Chinatown申请了那个政府的房子已经6年多了。
I've applied, and I've been waitlisted on the affordable housing list for over 6.5 years.
他们都说我收入不够，所以说6年多都没有通知我，都申请不到房子。
I was informed that my income wasn't enough and doesn't meet the guidelines, so that's why I haven't heard from anyone or from the agency for over 6 years.
我希望政府能不能多建一点可负担性的房子。
I'm hoping, and I was wondering if it would be possible to build more units for single folks.
我们很多朋友都住在菜大上，现在菜大上的房子越来越贵，越来越贵，每个人差不多要负担500到600块钱，我们都负担不起了。
I have a lot of friends who actually live in Chinatown, and the rents have increased so much. And for one person, our rent would be about $600 per month, and we cannot afford this high rent.
我也没有什么了，就是说希望政府能建一点低收入可以负担的房子，谢谢。
And that's all I want to say and reiterate, that the government could build more affordable housing and low-income housing so that we can afford to continue to live in Boston. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Melissa. Lydia, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Lydia Lowe, and I'm the director of the Chinatown Community Land Trust. I'm here to support the Home Rule petition. The inclusionary development program and linkage are existing policies that are creating extremely needed resources for affordable housing. It's important to make these policies more long-term than simply executive order, and therefore the Home Rule petition is important. It's also important that inclusionary development no longer be tied to zoning relief, but rather a standard requirement, particularly as zoning is being amended in different neighborhoods following community plans. The city needs a variety of tools to address the current crisis, including leveraging commercial development, but also supporting development and preservation of affordable housing, protection of tenants, and greater community control of land. Coming from our point of view in Chinatown, we would like to see a particular focus on countering displacement. We will continue to work with the City Council and the administration on improvements to the inclusionary development program to play a stronger and even stronger role in stabilizing working-class neighborhoods, including we think there's a need to target affordability levels to the greatest need in order to stabilize at-risk neighborhoods, and to ask something that we have not talked about much, but we need to ask developers to have a designated fee that developers pay that will adequately support the type of monitoring and stewardship of inclusionary development units to ensure that those are there in perpetuity. We also think that it would be important that as we're creating these affordable units that we also review and perhaps update a diversity preference pilot policy which is in place to particularly address communities of color that are impacted by displacement. This is a pilot policy that's looking at being able to prioritize affordable housing slots to neighborhood residents who are affected by displacement, where they meet certain demographic conditions and don't run counter to fair housing law. We also think that we should look at the piloting of anti-displacement zones as places where we may seek even higher levels of affordability or other types of community protections. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Welcome, sir. If you can just name an affiliation for the record, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. My name is Luther Pinckney. I work for Best Hospitality Training. I also am a resident in Roxbury. City Councilor Janie is my counselor. I speak to you in several different hats. First being from Best Hospitality, who does receive linkage funds for training that we do in Roxbury for Roxbury and Boston residents who receive and get good jobs. The current pay that we're bringing people into now is over $23 an hour. These are life-sustaining jobs, and the greatest thing about it is the benefits. So these are real careers for people who are able to join these jobs and really become or cement themselves in the community. I consider them community building jobs because it allows people to have one job and actually come to things like this, go to city engagements, go to their children's after-school programs, things of that nature. So I consider these community building jobs, and it's one of the reasons that I and my organization is very in favor of this. Councilor Flaherty made some very good points earlier about transparency, and I think that should absolutely be. We should talk about 1,000 or 100,000 or below, whatever it may be. That sliding scale, I do agree with. And Councilor Edwards' point of having the city council have some kind of say in the matter as well, as I do approve of as well. But I want to make sure that we don't overcomplicate this. The workforce development from the city of Boston is doing a really good job. Obviously, they issued their public reports, and I think that they're doing a good job at aligning programs that are working, and I think that we should continue working with that. As a community member, I see the difference that these jobs do for the community. I personally been in the industry for over 20 years. It's allowed me to buy a home in my community that I grew up in. It allowed me the stability to be able to do things like I'm doing today. And I think that's what we all want. This definitely can be fired under Boston Strong. We as Bostonians helping Bostonians. And it really just only makes sense in my eyes. So I appreciate the councilor's time on this matter and definitely want to vote, show you my support.
Thank you, Luther. My colleague, Councilor Kim Janey, has a question.
Hi, Luther.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Thank you for your advocacy and all that you're doing for residents, particularly of Roxbury, but certainly the entire city. These are good jobs. These are life-changing jobs. I appreciate that. I just wanted to take a moment. I don't have a question. I just wanted to take a moment to wish you a happy birthday. I know it was
Thank
your
you
birthday
very much,
the other
Councilor.
day.
Happy birthday, Luther.
Since you're my constituent.
Thank you very much.
Very nice. Thank you. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you,
You too.
Mr.
So
Chair.
I'm going to call some folks down. Mark, looks like Geyering, Shirley Fickett, Janice Henderson, Ahmad Ibrahim, Amanda Govin, and looks like Richard Giordano. Richard, I didn't. I thought he might have stepped out, but folks let him know that I called his name. And so, as I had called your name, just come right down and offer some testimony. You have the floor, sir. Mark, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. My name is Mark Jarina. I'm the Chief Program Officer at Operation ABLE of Greater Boston and a member of the Job Training Alliance. I'm speaking here on behalf of Boston's unemployed older workers who continue to be left behind by Boston's booming economy. They're usually the first to get laid off, take the longest to be reemployed, and often land jobs that don't utilize the skills, talents, and experience they've acquired during the years. They want and need to return to work, and more individuals over the age of 50 are in the workforce than ever before. They and all of Boston's unemployed residents need programs such as those funded by the Neighborhood Jobs Trust through these linkage fees to receive the skills, training, employment services, internships, and the necessary supports to secure and retain good jobs. The need for more funds for training and employment services for all Boston residents cannot be overstated. I ask for your support in taking this first step in making it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Shirley?
Can I defer to two of my students first?
Do whatever. Just you guys, you have the floor, so whatever works best for you.
Good afternoon. My name is Janice Henderson, and I'm a participant in Operation ABLE. And I needed a training program, and Operation ABLE is a training program to help people find jobs due to their age. Operation ABLE have a networking of business partners with age-friendly and hiring people over the age of 45. I know my age would have played a big factor for me in trying to get a job on my own. I was laid off from my job in January, and I wanted to change careers and transfer my skills into a new career. A few weeks later, I met Shirley and Dave of Operation ABLE at Mass Higher Goodwill in Boston. The both of them came to talk about Operation ABLE medical training program. I was very interested in being that medical field is very high in demand. I was accepted into the medical training program, and I learned the fundamentals of electronic medical records, which consist of patient registration, appointments, scheduling, and HIPAA. I had completed 99 exercises out of 110 on electronic health records training. In class, I learned about medical terminology, internships, job search, job interviewing, and how to dress for a job interview, role-playing for mock telephone, and person-to-person job interview. I am now in my 7th week at Operation Able in the Skills to Work training program, where I am advancing in my computer skills in Microsoft, Outlook, PowerPoint, Excel, Access, to name a few. I want to support Mayor Walsh's initiative to increase the linkage fees. With the help and support of Operation Able staff, I am more confident I will succeed in getting a job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Govan. I'm also one of the students of Operation Able. I've had the opportunity to meet Shirley, I would say a couple years back, and she has stayed in my memory ever since, and I'm actually humbled to actually be a part of her tutelage and actually a part of that organization, as they've been able to help train me and help me update my skills of my ICD-9, ICD-10 coding, and actually have me stay in the career lane of being a medical administrative assistant. But I am also here to actually speak on the actual honest AMI of the Dorchester, Roxbury, and Mattapan neighborhoods that are also being hit hard with the gentrification and displacement rates. And I would like to also bring to light that when job training, good jobs, and adequate housing, all of these are tied together. You can't have one without the other. You can't have a good job and no housing. You can't have, good housing and no job because you have to pay the rent. But I also feel that at the end of the day, a lot of opportunities still need to be in the inner city neighborhoods, and also when a lot of these developers come in, they need to have an honest look at Dorchester, at Roxbury, at Mattapan, and know that this is what the community needs, this is what will actually help the community grow, and this will actually bring up the income and the wage gap and actually helps folk grow in the income disparity, and also have them feel secure in getting a better job and actually not relying on state benefits such as food stamps or cash assistance or child support, and actually feeling comfortable in their stability and not necessarily feeling frightened of losing their apartment or losing their house or anything like that, because we all need stability. Housing is a basic human right, no matter what color this is. And at the end of the day, we all have families, we all have people to take care of, and at the end of the day, when adequate jobs and high pay jobs are actually provided for people that live within the community, they're able to thrive within the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to meet you and just talk a few minutes about my students. My name is Shirley Fickett, and I'm a program manager and an instructor at Operation Able. Operation Able is also a member of the Job Training Alliance that you mentioned, and we also are lucky enough to have the NJT grant as one of our funders. You mentioned metrics many, many times. I think that that is the most rigid grant that we enforce at this point in time, and the metrics are there because we do and are incented to get that second half of the fee. I feel the pressure because I administer the grant, and I take in the students and I pre-screen them and I qualify them. And while that's part of my everyday job, the NJT grant in and of itself through the Office of Workforce Development is one of the more restrictive, yet requires the most outcomes. Though I'm required to do outcomes for just about everything that we do. My role as program manager is not only that as program manager, but social worker, mother, father, sister, brother, and the biggest role I find I play is advocate. My students come in, many of them, part of the grant, the NJT grant, is that we hit benchmarks for the people that we enroll in the program, and it's only a 25% benchmark. Those benchmarks include people with quarries, people who are homeless, near homeless, or on welfare. I can naturally hit that 25% without even looking for candidates. Most of my population, I hit that number of about 80% of the clients that I serve. I'm really pleased to talk about the success stories, the placement rates, the people that are getting jobs that are able to be funded. And in my 4+ years at Operation Able, I've had the great opportunity and the humble ability to teach and train 80 students who otherwise would not have had the funding and the ability to find their way back to the workforce, to find their way off of SNAP, off of Section 8 housing, and off of welfare. So please support the program. Thank you.
Thank you. Waiting on Ahmad Ibrahim. I have Tracy Anderson. Looks like Kathy, tough to read the name, but from the Boston Tenant Organization, looks like Bruin, maybe? Kathy Breen. And then I have Kai Hart. Looks like Kai Grant, I'm sorry. And Kathleen Pena. Kathy Brown, is it a Brown? I'm sorry, Kathy. I didn't see Ace. W looked like an A, I'm sorry. Welcome, Kathy, good to see you.
Thank you, good
You
to
have the
see
floor.
both of you. So, as you know, my name is Kathy Brown, and I'm a long-term resident of Jamaica Plain and the coordinator of the Boston Tenant Coalition, a coalition of tenant housing, community and homeless groups working together to support the rights of tenants and to expand the supply of permanently affordable housing for low and moderate income residents. So we want to add our support to this home rule petition. Both the linkage and the inclusionary development program are critical tools for the city of Boston to use in addressing Boston's great housing needs, and in the case of linkage, both housing and job training, as you've heard from the very powerful testimony today by many individuals and organizations. Both of these programs, linkage and IDP, need to be updated in order to capture more desperately needed funding for housing and job training from Boston's large-scale housing and commercial development. In the case of IDP, a significant number of housing units are also captured by this program. Passing this home rule would allow Boston to make the needed changes without having to get permission from the state legislature. The city of Boston should have such authority as the administration, council, and community partners know much more about Boston's housing crisis and needs and the best tools to address. There are current limitations under state law with these programs, and with linkage, Boston's not allowed to update the formula beyond the CPI every 3 years, and IDP, only a zoning variance triggers the IDP requirement. The city of Boston needs to make the ability to make these changes to get the most out of these important programs. The Boston Tenant Coalition looks to the Linkage Coalition to identify needed changes for the linkage program, and the BTC is helping to convene a broad coalition of housing, homeless, and community groups that is advocating and working with the city for needed changes and updates to the program. We are looking forward to the city to increase the set-aside of units, the affordability of the units, the length of affordability. We are looking forward to a future hearing that Councilors Flaherty, Flynn, and Edwards have called upon to discuss the IDP program and more of these details. So we urge you to pass this quickly so it can move to the State House for speedy passage so Boston can get the most out of these critical tools to help address these great needs. Thank you. And the displacement crisis.
Thank you, Kathy, and it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Welcome.
Hi. Hi, my name is Alexandra Weber. I hope we're not out of place. I'm representing Ahmed Ibrahim. I just wanted to say I'm from the International Institute of New England. We provide refugee resettlement, education, English language training, and career pathway programs. We have Ahmed here today to speak to you about the experience that he had in our program. We're a member of the JTA, and we're partially funded by NJT. And with more resources, we could serve more people like Ahmed, who is a great example of a wonderful success story. So thank you.
Yes. Sure. Can you?
Sure.
To the
So
chair.
we're a member of the Jobs Training Alliance, represented by Amy Nishman today, and we get partial funding from the Neighborhood Jobs Trust.
Thank you.
Oh, hi, good evening. My name is Ahmed Ibrahim. I'm from Sudan. I come here 2016, September, because when I come here, very difficult languages, because my first language is Arabic. I'm from Sudan. I stayed there. I'm not finished my education from Sudan because my dad is died. I asked my mom, I said, what can I do? Because I don't have the future in the Sudan. I said, when I can live, he said, yeah, of course, you have to live. So when I can go to any country, because I left my country, I lived in the Lebanon, Beirut. I was lived there like 6 years. And then I want to go to apply at United Nations in Beirut. And then take long time, like 1 year, and then I come here. I come here, I don't know anything before. The languages is very difficult for me. International Institute New England of the Boston. They are helping me a lot for the hospital training program. I didn't know anything about this hotels, industry, about these programs. They are helping me and finding good job at hospital, Boston Harbor Hotel now. When I come here, it was very difficult for the people in the communication for the people. And then I learned a lot for the programs. They are learning everything for the job showing. They are showing me everything for the history for the Boston history, for all the history in the Boston. They are giving a good job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any
Thank
question?
you so much.
Thank you.
Very good. Anyone else wishing to offer public testimony at this time may do so. If you have not heard your name calling, but you've signed the sign-in sheet. Thank you for your testimony, sir. You're welcome. Seeing and hearing no additional desire for any additional testimony, does my colleague have any parting comments at this time? Very good. So on behalf of the council, as chair, that will conclude the hearing on docket 0106, a home rule petition calling in the form of, I guess, the amendments to make, well, adjustments, I should say, to the linkage formula, as well as to the codifying the city's IDP into the zoning code. And so with that, I'll obviously have a conversation with the administration and reduce the writing a committee report, and then try to get something before the council as quickly as possible. So I appreciate everyone's time and attention, and that will conclude the hearing on docket 0106 in the Committee on Government Operations. The committee is adjourned.